Thanks. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about the Hill of Tara. When the call for papers went out and there was a session about kind of the past 30 years of ARG and thinking back over, past aerial archaeological research, the Hill of Tara, which is the project I'm working on at the moment, was kind of a prime candidate for that. So the Discovery Programme was established in 1991, and the Hill of Tara was kind of their key or kind of flagship project, and research began on that in 1992. So we're well into the 30 years, specifically at the site with targeted research, tackling it kind of both from an aerial perspective, and just as a content warning, there might be some geophysics, but I'll keep it short. So mapping an archaeological complex from above and from below, and from any other angles we can think of as well. So it's located in County Meath in Ireland. The red outline there is the limits of the state-owned lands, and that's the focus of our current project. It's a fully publicly accessible site, so it's a huge part of the local community. People come there every day to walk their dogs, to exercise, as well as tourists and tour groups as well. There's an excellent coffee shop if anyone's there. So at the moment, there's 67 recorded archaeological monuments within that state-owned lands boundary. Beyond that then, there's 191 recorded archaeological monuments within a 3-kilometre radius. So it's quite a well-populated area from an archaeological perspective. A lot of the monuments, there's a lot of barrows there, but we have evidence from the Neolithic at the site, right up until medieval, post-medieval, and into modern times as well. It's currently on the UNESCO World Heritage tentative list as part of the Royal Sites of Ireland, along with 4 other royal sites within the country. So it's a really important archaeological complex. It's known as a sacred site, as a royal site, and a really significant site, right, as I say, from the Neolithic right through to today. So I'm going to focus on, I suppose, as this is the ARG conference, the kind of aerial research that we've done, but to give you an idea of the site itself. And actually, if you see here, you'll see where the Discovery Programme established its logo back in 1991. So we have the Neolithic Passage Tomb, which is the Mound of the Hostages, and that's the oldest known monument on the site. This was actually excavated by the British Israelites in 1899 to 1902 because they were convinced the Ark of the Covenant was there. It has to be somewhere. Why not there? They didn't find it. And excavations were undertaken there in the 1950s and 1970s as well. So at the Mound of the Hostages and also at the Rath of the Synods here. So you can see, there's a lot of kind of really huge, substantial earthworks, kind of barrow type monuments down here as well under the vegetation. We have the Lia Fall, which is a standing stone known as the Stone of Destiny. This is probably not the original stone and probably not its original location. And actually, as another part of this has been damaged in recent years. So the Discovery Programme have undertaken some 3D modelling and photogrammetry studies of it so that we can actually record its condition now and kind of try and track how it's deteriorating over time, and also if there's further damage to it. We have this linear earthwork, Teach Mí Cuairte, which actually translates from Irish as the banqueting hall. And that's because there's a kind of an Irish historical document which lays out how people would have been arranged and organised in their seats at a royal banquet. And this has become associated with this linear earthwork, which really doesn't look like a banqueting hall at all. But there has been a huge influence in the past, particularly with Tara, and I'll show you in the next slide, of where historical documents have kind of really informed at the outset what we understood about the site. And it's really only with, I suppose, the onset of aerial archaeology in particular, which we'll see, that we started to see kind of beyond the kind of documentary sources and look at the archaeology. We've Rathgráinne, which is a ring barrow, quite a substantial one. And just to point out, this is Rathlera. I'll show you that on the last slide. Again, quite a substantial earthen enclosure. And you can probably see all of the plough lines and ridge and furrow, which completely cover the site as well, which kind of shows, it was used not only as a royal or sacred site, but then it just began to be developed as farmland in later years as well. So these are some of the historical maps. This is from 1839. There was another one by Westrop and Murphy in 1894. So a couple of the names of sites have moved around as people kind of began to try and understand them a bit better. So this Westrop one would have been shortly before the Ark of the Covenant search in 1899. And then the later one in 1919 by R.E.S. McAllister. Again, nothing's really changed. There's no really new monuments there. We're still looking at the same basic layout and the same basic understanding of what's there based on the historical sources and the kind of earthen embankments and ditches and earthworks that we can see visibly on the site. So everything changed really in the 1970s. So there were aerial surveys undertaken, which are part of the QCAP collection now. But Leo Swan in the 1970s undertook the first kind of systematic aerial survey of the Hill of Tara. And this was really, I think, the catalyst for, I suppose, understanding that we actually didn't know everything about the site, that there was definitely more to it than what we could see visibly and to what the historical documents could say. As part of his, I don't know why I've highlighted these in a room full of aerial archaeologists, you can probably see them. He flew it at the end of March 1975, and there was following a season of unusual dryness and unfavourable sunlight as well. And because of that, he discovered evidence for 8 new sites or monuments, as well as providing evidence which confirmed previous observations and which supported other kind of sites or features that people were a bit more sceptical about. So Leo Swan's survey really showed that, you know, there's more to the site than meets the eye, basically. And that, you know, if we can find, you know, which was big here at the site at the time, 8 new monuments that we had absolutely no idea about, then what else are we not seeing? And just some other aerial shots by Leo Swan. So the first discovery program phase kicked off in 1991 or 1992, led by Conor Newman with the Del Vrahanoch, Joe Fenwick from NUIG, and Mark Knoll, who was with GeoQuest at that time. So the first phase was undertaking of geophysical survey, so it was magnetometry and electrical resistance. And you can see one of Mark Knoll's electrical resistance surveys here. This is Rathgráine, the barrow that we saw earlier. That's that whole field. They covered a huge amount of ground with those techniques. And I mean, fairly early, I suppose, certainly in Ireland, these would have been, you know, hugely new in an Irish context for geophysical research. But probably the most groundbreaking one was the topographic survey, which was undertaken by Ciarán Goucher using a total station and a data logger. And they recorded over 62,000 points, you know, point by point in the field, painstakingly over, I think it was over 3 to 6 months. And, you know, to produce what we now take for granted as a DEM, you know, from LiDAR. And I'm sure it wasn't quite as easy as clicking a button for them, but that was painstaking research. But it was groundbreaking in Ireland because it gave us that kind of first understanding of the topography of the site, again, beyond kind of what we visually understood. And we had 2 major publications come out of that as well in 95 and 97. The next phase then was later in the 90s, but there was further geophysical survey. And you can see this enclosure, which is known as the ditch pit circle. So it's a really substantial circular ditch with a double palisade, so a palisade on the outside and the inside. And that was brand new. That had never been uncovered before. You can see it encircled, the Rath of the Synods is pretty much in the center of it. It cuts under the present church, which is late medieval at the earliest. And then we have the Mound of the Hostages within part of it, and it's cutting that huge big enclosure, Rath Nuri as well. So it gave us an insight, I suppose, into that there could be a completely different sequence of events that we're not really understanding or seeing through it at the moment. There was also excavation there in the 90s, and part of this was to go back over some of the excavations from the 50s, which took place at Rath of the Synods and here at this area here, because the excavator died, unfortunately, before the final report and publication could be brought out. So we went back in the 90s to try and investigate and try and get some dates and tie in some data for there. So this was a huge step, particularly in terms of the geophysics, but then also it kind of led, again, we're finding new information, and it led again into that later next phase where we had the first we had a really high resolution LiDAR survey undertaken by BKS Fugro in 2008, and there was a photogrammetry survey along with that as well. So you can see the hill here. This is the photogrammetry survey, obviously, but it enabled us to expand kind of into that wider landscape and to set Tara within its context, and to look at the landscape around it. So the LiDAR survey didn't cover quite that big an area, but it did cover the hill and slightly beyond the hill. So I've cut it back here so we can see. But this is a really high resolution LiDAR survey. You can see the detail in the simple local relief model. Again, you can see the ploughing, all the direction changes with the ploughing. You can see new circular monuments kind of all over the place. But also you can see the ditch pit circle line. And I don't know if maybe you see it because we know it's there now, but it's very faint. And it's certainly not in the same detail, but we can see it there. And this is hugely important, not just, from an aerial perspective point of view, finding more kind of monuments, more features, and a bit more detail on the site. But I suppose to bring it into the next phase, actually, before I move on to the next phase, part of this survey, RGK came over and did a large-scale magnetometer survey with the cart. So it means that we've almost all of the kind of state-owned lands portion covered, both by LiDAR, photogrammetry, aerial survey, and also by magnetic survey as well, plus some of the resistance survey that was undertaken in the 1990s as well. So we have a huge amount of data there. And as part of this survey, Roseanne Scott and Ger Dowling expanded even further into the wider landscape. There was excavations, for example, at Faughan Hill, which is a hill fort nearby. And there's actually just been a publication about that just in the last month. So again, it kind of was an expansion of that, not just looking at Tara, but trying to understand kind of beyond that and how it sits within the landscape as well. So part of our current project is to collate all of those different data sets. So we've the aerial data sets, the photogrammetry, the LiDAR, the earlier kind of aerial photography, and then we have all of the geophysics that have been done, and trying to pull all of them together, overlay them, and then work towards recording each of the features. So for example, I'm recording it data set by data set. So we've the LiDAR data set. You can see kind of recording the main features here. Doing the same with the geophysical survey, recording all of the different features. This is just an example in the Rathlera area, that kind of large enclosure that was down at the south of the site. So you can see, we have the large ditched enclosure that's there. And actually, if I can go back, you can see on the LiDAR that it's obviously very clear here on the western side, but the eastern side, it's really just a very, very kind of barely visible extent there, but it shows up really, really nicely on the geophysics. So digitizing that, and then we're able to overlay all of the information from all of the different data sets to get kind of a fuller picture of activity at the site. And part of the reason for doing this is that there was a monument catalogue brought out in 2017, and because it's part of the state-owned lands and it's public access, a conservation management plan is needed, because obviously we want to protect the archaeological heritage that's there, but also while still allowing, enabling people to visit and understand and take part and enjoy the site as it is as well. So one of the big kind of benefits, because as well with the ploughing, and when you look at the different data sets, the ploughing kind of takes over, but by digitizing them, we can actually take out the ploughing, and take out the noise and the things that we don't want to see. So we can actually see the archaeology beneath that. And that's really important from a non-archaeology audience perspective as well, because the people on the ground, For example, the OPW, the Office of Public Works, they physically manage the landscape in the site. They're cutting the grass, they're creating pathways, they're managing, the farming or animal access to the site. So it's really important that everybody understands, what's there when stuff that we can't even see. It's easy to go, okay, I won't go through there, it's a massive bank. But when you're unaware of what's underneath the ground, it makes that a bit more challenging. So that's part of what we're trying to do, is to record all of the features and monuments of archaeological potential and be able to share that then and look towards developing our conservation plan. And part of this is to do with the condition of the various monuments at the site. As I say, there's a lot of public access, there's sports training, there's people walking. So John Lawler, who's the senior photographer with the National Monument Service, undertook a UAV survey in June, over kind of that first year of COVID, when he was able to get up to the site. So he took a series of photographs over 3 months to kind of look at vegetation, but also to try and look at and understand and investigate the condition of the various monuments at the site. So you can see, obviously the November 2021, I mean, the lighting is just brilliant to be able to see some of the less visible monuments that are there. And this, I suppose, really drives home the need to do further aerial survey, I think, at Tara, because we have the LiDAR data sets, we've all the geophysics. The geophysics, unless we bring in a new technique, those results aren't going to change. But I think with the aerial survey, we'll see the landscape and the land changing over time with different vegetation, different lighting, all of that kind of thing. So what I'd love to see is, maybe a more systematic aerial approach that can feed in probably to the land management and the conservation plan as well. And it's something that we're probably missing in Ireland. Leo Swan did his surveys in the 70s. Gillian Barrett was fantastic, as we heard earlier, at one of the initial ARG meetings. She was a fantastic aerial photographer in Ireland, but we're missing that, I think, now that we just don't have the means at the moment to be able to try and undertake a more systematic survey. And it's something that I think would really benefit the site in terms of our understanding of it, but also in terms of management as well. So I suppose I want to finish up really by, the session is like past, present, future, and I suppose that's what we're trying to do with the kind of current phase of the project that I'm working on. We're looking at, data and information that was collected over the past 30 to 50 years, looking at it now in the present, interpreting it, trying to understand it so that in the future we can protect the heritage, understand the landscape better, and ultimately kind of help to preserve it for many, many generations to come. So thank you.